The baby's screams pierced through the luxury cabin like shattered glass, relentless, desperate, and utterly unstoppable. Every passenger within earshot winced, shifted uncomfortably, or shot nervous glances toward the source of the disturbance. But none dared to complain. Not when they saw the man seated 3 rows back. Florentino Ricardo sat rigidly in the custom leather seat, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. The perfectly tailored black suit that normally made him look like a dark prince now seemed to constrict around him like a cage. His normally cold, calculating eyes held a flicker of something foreign. Panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. Before we continue, a quick question for you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it over there right now? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means a lot and helps stories like this reach more amazing people. Now, back to the chaos. The infant, his son, continued to wail from the bassinet beside him, tiny fists flailing against the silk blanket. 2 months old and already bearing the weight of a legacy he didn't ask for. 2 months since Elena had taken her last breath, 1 day after bringing this child into the world. 1 single day of holding her son before the complications stole her away. 2 months since Florentino Ricardo, the most feared Mafia boss in the Western Hemisphere, had become something he never thought possible. Helpless. Beside the bassinet, a young woman trembled violently. The nanny Ricardo's family had hired to accompany the infant. She rocked the baby frantically, tried the bottle again, whispered desperate lullabies that dissolved into tears. Nothing worked. "Sir," one of Ricardo's bodyguards leaned in carefully, speaking low enough that other passengers couldn't hear. "We could land early, find a hospital." "No," Ricardo's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "We stay on schedule." But the baby didn't care about schedules. He didn't care that his father controlled half the criminal operations from New York to Miami, that men crossed streets to avoid his shadow, that entire families had vanished at his word. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the absence of warmth he'd known for 1 precious day before it was stolen away forever. Ricardo had tried everything. Bottles prepared by specialists, pacifiers imported from Italy, rocking motions that felt awkward in arms more accustomed to signing death warrants than soothing cries. Nothing worked. 4 rows ahead, Amanda Mitchell heard the desperate cries and felt something crack open inside her chest. She knew that sound, the raw, primal wail of an infant who needed something beyond bottles and blankets. Something deeper. Her younger brother had suffered night terrors as a baby, and she'd spent countless nights learning to calm the chaos his tiny nervous system couldn't process. Amanda had been working for Skylux Aviation for 8 months, and she'd survived by following 1 simple rule: never draw attention to yourself. She'd served champagne to oil tycoons, refilled caviar for tech billionaires, and smiled politely to men who thought air-hostess meant invisible servant. But this crying, it was different. It wasn't just loud, it was desperate, afraid. The kind of cry that happened when an infant's senses were drowning. Her supervisor had warned her before takeoff. Ricardo hates noise. Keep the cabin silent. No interruptions, no mistakes. Easy enough, until now. The crying intensified, and Amanda watched the nanny begin to sob, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the child. Then, without warning, Ricardo stood. The entire cabin seemed to stop breathing. He approached the bassinet slowly, like winter descending. Every step deliberate, controlled, lethal. "Make it stop," he said, his voice dangerously calm. The nanny froze, tears streaming down her face. I'm trying, sir, I swear, I've tried everything. He won't." Passengers held their breath. Amanda stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Sir, may I try?" Every head in first class snapped toward her. Ricardo turned, not angry but curious, assessing her like a puzzle he didn't remember ordering. "No one touches my son," he said quietly. "Not on my jet." "He's not in pain," Amanda said softly, steadily. "He's overwhelmed. The cabin pressure, the dryness, the unfamiliar sounds. His nervous system is overloaded. He doesn't need silence. He needs grounding." Ricardo's eyes narrowed, dark, sharp, calculating. "And you know this because my brother had night terrors as an infant. It sounds like chaos, but it's just fear. You don't force the calm, you pattern it." Silence stretched across the cabin like a blade. Then Ricardo stepped aside. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "Show me." Amanda's heart hammered as she approached the trembling nanny. "May I?" The woman nodded shakily, placing the screaming infant into Amanda's arms. And in that moment, as the baby's cries echoed through the jet and Florentino Ricardo watched with eyes that could end lives, Amanda realized she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. Amanda didn't bounce the baby, didn't shush him, didn't force anything. She held the infant firmly against her chest, not tight but secure, and began a rhythmic pattern her body remembered even when her mind had tried to forget. 3 gentle taps to the back, 2 soft presses on the soles of his tiny feet. Slow inhale, slow exhale, repeat. The cabin watched in suspended silence. Even Ricardo's bodyguards leaned forward slightly, transfixed. The baby's cries began to fracture, breaking into hiccups, then softer cries, then confused whimpers. Amanda continued the pattern, steady, unshakable. Her heartbeat became a metronome for the child's chaos. Within 90 seconds, the crying diminished. Within 3 minutes, the baby slept. The nanny sobbed, relief pouring out of her in broken gasps. One of the passengers exhaled audibly. Another whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Ricardo approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "What did you just do?" His voice was low, dangerous with curiosity. "Neurological reset," Amanda said quietly, still holding the sleeping infant. "Babies panic when their senses overload. You can't talk them out of it or feed it away. You replace the chaos with steady, predictable patterns. It gives their nervous system something to latch onto." "You calmed him without fear," Ricardo observed, his dark eyes studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. "Interesting." Amanda carefully transferred the sleeping baby back to the nanny, who clutched him like he was made of glass and miracles. "Thank you," she whispered, voice raw. "Thank you, thank you." Amanda nodded, stepping back, but Ricardo's hand caught her wrist. Not rough, just present. "Why do you know so much about infant trauma?" he asked, meeting her gaze despite every instinct screaming to look away. "My younger brother," Amanda said, quietly. "He had severe night terrors. Traditional methods didn't work. I had to learn what his body needed, not what the books said." Ricardo released her wrist slowly, something shifting behind his eyes, a crack in the armor.
"His mother died 2 months ago.
1 day after giving birth. He hasn't stopped crying since." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Amanda felt the weight of it, the grief, the fury, the sheer helplessness of a man who controlled empires but couldn't soothe his own son's pain. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Ricardo nodded once, then turned away, dismissing her with the subtle shift of his shoulders. Amanda returned to the galley, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading.
She busied herself clearing champagne glasses, checking supplies, trying to settle her racing heart. When her eyes caught the digital manifest screen mounted near the service panel, she frowned. The cargo weight logs didn't match the listed manifest. 2 crates marked medical supplies showed weight discrepancies of nearly 40 kilograms. More disturbing, the infrared cargo monitor displayed faint heat signatures emanating from those same crates. Medical supplies didn't generate heat. Amanda pulled up the access logs, her pulse quickening. Someone had entered the cargo hold 30 minutes before takeoff. Unauthorized entry, no security clearance recorded. Her breath caught. She glanced toward the cabin where Ricardo sat, his sleeping son finally peaceful beside him. And suddenly, horribly, Amanda understood. The baby's crying hadn't been the crisis. It had been the distraction. Someone was using this jet, Ricardo's jet, to move something they desperately needed to hide. And if Ricardo found out, everyone on board could be dead before they landed. Amanda's fingers flew across the manifest screen, pulling up time-stamped access records. There, 0347 hours, cargo hold access, authorization code, override. Someone had bypassed the security system entirely. Her stomach twisted. She needed to tell someone, her supervisor, the head of cabin crew, anyone with authority who could... Wait, where was her supervisor? Amanda moved through the galley, checking the crew rest area. Empty. The forward lavatory. Empty. The service corridor leading to the cockpit. Empty. Her pulse began to hammer against her ribs. She turned back toward the main galley and froze. In the reflection of the polished cabin door window, she saw movement in the rear galley shadows. Two men she didn't recognize, wearing Skylux uniforms that fit wrong, too tight in the shoulders, too loose at the waist. And between them, her supervisor, being dragged backward, a hand clamped over his mouth. His eyes were wide with terror. Amanda's breath stopped. She ducked behind the beverage cart, heart threatening to shatter through her chest. Think. She pulled up the cargo manifest again, hands shaking. Medical supplies, 80 kilograms listed. Actual weight, 122 kilograms. 42 kilograms unaccounted for. Heat signatures, 2 distinct sources, both reading 310 Kelvin, just above human body temperature. Medical supplies don't generate heat. Medical supplies don't weigh 40 kilograms more than listed. Medical supplies don't require unauthorized cargo access. The pieces slammed together in her mind like a gun being loaded. The baby's nonstop crying had thrown the entire cabin into chaos from the moment they'd taken off. Passengers distracted, crew overwhelmed. Even Ricardo, the most observant, dangerous man on this jet, had been consumed by his son's distress. No one had been watching the cargo hold. No one had been monitoring access logs. No one had questioned the 2 extra crew members who'd boarded at the last minute. The crying hadn't been an unfortunate coincidence. It had been the perfect cover. Someone had known the baby would scream, had counted on it, had used an infant's grief to mask something far more sinister. Amanda's hands went cold. If those crates contained what she thought they did, weapons, contraband, something worth smuggling on a mafia boss's private jet, then everyone on board was in danger. Because when Ricardo discovered the betrayal, there would be no mercy. Not for the smugglers, not for the crew who'd failed to notice, not for anyone. She glanced toward the cabin. The baby slept peacefully now, the small monitor she'd clipped to his blanket showing steady, quiet breathing. The nanny dozed in her seat, exhausted. Amanda slipped into the rear galley with practiced silence, moving like a shadow between the stainless steel counters, and saw everything. Her supervisor, Marcus, sat bound to the jump seat with zip ties, a cloth gag stuffed in his mouth. His face was bruised, one eye swelling shut. When he saw her, his eyes went wide with terror, and he shook his head violently. "Run," his expression screamed. "Get out." But Amanda's gaze had already shifted to the 2 men crouched over the cargo crates. They pried the lids open with crowbars, exposing contents that made her blood turn to ice. Weapons. Not handguns or hunting rifles. Military-grade assault weapons. Custom modifications. Thermal adaptive ammunition that glowed faintly in the dim light. Rounds designed to pierce body armor, to burn through reinforced steel. Enough firepower to start a small war or end a large one. "Jesus," one of the men muttered, running inventory. "If customs finds this on Ricardo's jet..." "They won't find it," the other said coldly. "They'll find Ricardo, dead, along with everyone else on board. The weapons get discovered after the crash. He gets blamed for international arms trafficking. The Santoro family takes the fall clean. Amanda's heart stopped. This wasn't smuggling. This was a frame job. Someone was using Ricardo's private jet, his reputation, his name, his son, to destroy him completely. And everyone on this flight was collateral damage. She took one careful step backward, and her shoe caught the edge of a metal tray. The sound was barely a whisper, but in the confined galley, it rang like a gunshot. Both men's heads snapped toward her. "Hey." Amanda didn't think. She slammed her palm against the emergency galley panel, the silent alarm that bypassed the cabin speakers and sent a direct alert to the cockpit and security systems. One of the men lunged. Amanda grabbed the nearest object, the thermal kettle still boiling from the last tea service, and hurled the scalding water directly into his face. He screamed, stumbling backward, clawing at his eyes. The second man charged, reaching for something at his belt, when the lights died. Every electrical system in the cabin cut out simultaneously, plunging the jet into absolute darkness. Emergency lighting didn't engage, backup systems stayed silent. Someone had killed the power manually. Amanda pressed herself against the galley wall, hard hammering so hard she thought it might tear through her ribs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the cabin, not panicked, not hurried, deliberate, controlled, lethal. Then a voice cut through the darkness like a blade through silk, low, cold, and wrapped in barely contained fury. "Who touched my jet?" Florentino Ricardo. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Amanda heard movement, fast, violent, bodies slamming into metal, muffled grunts, the wet sound of impacts that ended with silence. Gunfire cracked twice, sharp, deafening in the enclosed space. Then nothing. Just breathing, heavy, controlled, waiting. When the emergency lights finally flickered back on, bathing everything in dim red, Amanda stood frozen against the galley wall. The two men lay motionless on the floor, weapons scattered. Ricardo's elite bodyguards flanked the entrance, guns drawn. And in the center of the carnage stood Ricardo himself, black suit unmarred, except for a thin line of blood across his left cuff. His eyes found Amanda immediately. Dark, assessing, unreadable. He walked toward her slowly, stepping over bodies like they were furniture. "You," he said quietly, "explain." Ricardo stared out the window, one hand resting near his son's bassinet, his expression carved from stone. No one was looking at Amanda. No one was paying attention to the junior air hostess quietly checking supplies in the galley. She had one chance, one window of opportunity before those men in the rear galley realized she'd seen them, before they came for her too. Amanda straightened, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. She took one steadying breath. Then she moved toward the rear galley, toward the weapons, the strangers, and the supervisors whose life hung by a thread, toward the truth that could kill them all. Amanda's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The cargo manifest didn't match the weight logs," she said, forcing herself to meet Ricardo's dark gaze. 2 crates registered 42 kilograms over, heat signatures where there shouldn't be any. Someone accessed the hold 30 minutes before takeoff, unauthorized override code. Ricardo's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation. "I went looking for my supervisor," Amanda continued, gesturing toward Marcus, who slumped in the jump seat, still bound but conscious. "Found him being dragged back here. Then I saw—" She nodded toward the open crates. "Those." Ricardo turned slowly, his gaze falling on the weapons displayed like evidence at a crime scene. military-grade rifles, thermal rounds, custom modifications that didn't exist on any legal market. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "They were going to frame you," Amanda said quietly. "Let the jet land with these on board. Make it look like you were trafficking weapons internationally. Then," she hesitated, "then eliminate everyone who could testify otherwise." "Including my son," Ricardo finished, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. Silence stretched between them, heavy as lead. Then Ricardo moved, not toward the weapons, but toward the cabin entrance. Through the doorway, Amanda could see the bassinet. The baby slept peacefully, tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, completely unaware that he'd been hours away from becoming collateral damage in someone else's war. Ricardo stared at his son for a long moment. When he turned back to Amanda, something had shifted in his expression. Not softer. Ricardo would never be soft, but present, aware, devastatingly focused. "You calmed him," Ricardo said, "when no one else could, when I couldn't." Amanda nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "You saw what everyone else missed. The weight discrepancy, the heat signatures, the unauthorized access. You connected pieces that my own security team," he gestured toward his bodyguards, who looked appropriately uncomfortable, "failed to notice. No." Ricardo stepped closer, and Amanda felt the full weight of his presence, the danger, the power, the absolute certainty of a man who'd built an empire on reading people correctly. "You weren't just doing anything. You made choices that should have gotten you killed. You saw a threat and you acted, alone, without backup, without permission." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was an equation he was only now beginning to solve. "From this moment," Ricardo said, his voice dropping to something that felt like a vow, "you work for me. Not Skylux, not anyone else. Me." Amanda's heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm just an air hostess." "No," Ricardo said again, and this time there was something almost like respect in his tone. "You're the only person on this jet who saved my son twice in one night, the only one who saw the trap before it closed." He extended his hand, not a request, but an inevitability. "Welcome to my world, Amanda Mitchell." Amanda stared at his outstretched hand, at the blood on his cuff, at the weapons scattered across the galley floor, at the sleeping baby in the cabin beyond, finally, mercifully at peace. She knew what this meant, knew there was no going back once she took his hand, knew her life would never be ordinary again. Amanda took his hand, and everything changed. The private lounge at the rear of the jet felt smaller with Ricardo in it. He dismissed his guards, leaving only Amanda and Marcus, now freed from his restraints and nursing a split lip with an ice pack. The weapons had been secured, the bodies removed to the cargo hold. Everything sanitized, everything controlled. Except the truth. Ricardo stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the darkness beyond the glass. "They knew," Ricardo said, quietly. "My enemies. They knew that losing Elena would break something in me." Amanda remained silent, sensing this wasn't a conversation, it was a confession. "One day," Ricardo continued, his voice tight, "she had one day with our son before the hemorrhaging started, before the doctors couldn't stop it. Before..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "They knew I would be vulnerable, distracted, that the baby's crying would consume everyone's attention. They used your grief as cover," Amanda said softly. Ricardo turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw past the armor, saw the father who couldn't soothe his own child, The widower who'd lost his wife before he'd truly had her. The man who'd built an empire on control, only to discover he controlled nothing that mattered. The baby wasn't the crisis, Amanda realized aloud. You were. Something flickered in Ricardo's eyes, recognition perhaps, or respect. He crossed to the Launa's built-in desk, pulling up a tablet that displayed flight logs, security feeds, and crew manifests. I need you to look at this, he said. Tell me what you see. Amanda moved closer, scanning the data with the same focus she'd applied to the cargo manifest. Her eyes moved rapidly, cross-referencing timestamps, authorization codes, crew rotations. There, she said, pointing to it, the two men in fake Skylux uniforms. They boarded during the standard crew change at 3:30 a.m., but look, she pulled up another screen. The real crew members they replaced were delayed by a traffic incident 40 minutes earlier. Convenient timing. Ricardo leaned in, watching her work. And here, Amanda continued, her finger tracing a pattern across the data. The cargo override code, it matches the security clearance of your head of ground operations. But the biometric signature is wrong. Someone cloned his credentials. Inside job, Ricardo murmured. Or someone very close to your inner circle, Amanda said, pulling up personnel files with startling speed. Someone who knew your flight schedule, knew about the baby, knew you'd be... She stopped, realizing she just called a Mafia boss emotionally compromised to his face. But Ricardo only nodded slowly, something dangerous settling into his expression. I need someone who thinks like this. Fast, precise, unafraid to see patterns others miss. He turned to face her fully. You find the traitors, Ricardo said, his voice dropping to something that felt like steel wrapped in velvet. I remove them. Amanda's breath caught. I'm just an air hostess. I analyze manifests and serve champagne. I don't... No. Ricardo interrupted, stepping closer until she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. You're the only person who saw what everyone else missed. My security team, trained, vetted, loyal, saw nothing. My advisors saw nothing. My own instincts were useless. He paused, letting that sink in. But you, a junior crew member who'd been on this jet for 8 hours, saw everything. I just noticed the weight discrepancy. You noticed because you were paying attention when no one else was, because you think in patterns, because you see the pieces that don't fit. Amanda's mind raced, caught between terror and something she couldn't quite name. I don't know anything about your world, about organized crime or... Good, Ricardo said simply. That means you're not corrupted by it yet. You see clearly. He extended his hand again, but this time it wasn't a handshake. It was a contract written in blood and necessity. Work for me, he said. Use that mind. Find the holes in my organization before my enemies do. Amanda looked at his outstretched hand, at Marcus, who watched with wide, fearful eyes, at the tablet displaying webs of data only she seemed able to unravel. And if I say no, she whispered. Ricardo's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped to something absolutely certain. Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering who else will die because you walked away. The cabin hummed with engine noise. The baby slept peacefully beyond the door, and Amanda Mitchell, who'd only wanted to serve champagne and stay invisible, realized she'd already made her choice the moment she'd stepped forward to calm a crying child. She took his hand. What do you need me to do? Ricardo's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Find who wants me dead, before they try again. The jet's wheels touched tarmac at 0423 hours, a private airfield outside Newark, cloaked in pre-dawn darkness. Amanda stood near the cabin door as the stairs descended, her new reality settling over her like a second skin. She wasn't crew anymore. She was something else entirely. Ricardo descended first, his son cradled carefully in his arms, the nanny close behind, still shaken but functional. His security team formed a tight perimeter, eyes scanning the tarmac with professional paranoia. Amanda followed, tablet tucked under her arm, when she heard the voice. Federal Aviation Administration, nobody moves. 6 men in official uniforms emerged from the shadows, badges glinting under the floodlights, weapons holstered but visible. The lead officer stepped forward, his expression carved from bureaucratic stone.
"We have reports of unauthorized cargo aboard this aircraft. Everyone stays put until we complete our inspection." Ricardo's bodyguards shifted subtly, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. But Ricardo raised one hand, a gesture that froze everyone in place. "By all means," he said smoothly, his voice carrying across the tarmac. "Inspect whatever you need." The officer's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting cooperation. "We'll also need to question your crew, starting with—" His gaze landed on Amanda. "Her." 2 officers moved toward her immediately. Amanda's pulse spiked. But before they'd taken 3 steps, Ricardo's men materialized like shadows, blocking their path without a word. The tension ratcheted instantly toward violence. "Sir," one of Ricardo's guards said quietly, "she's with us." "She's a witness," the lead officer snapped. "In a federal investigation, she comes with us, now." Amanda's mind raced, something nagging at the edge of her awareness. Then she saw it. The second officer's badge, the numbers partially visible beneath his jacket. FA 7731K. Her breath caught. She'd seen those exact digits 3 hours ago in the cargo access logs. "That badge," Amanda said loudly, pointing. "FA 7731K. That's the authorization code used to override the cargo hold security." Every head turned toward Amanda. The officer's expression flickered, just for a microsecond, but Amanda caught it. Panic. "You're lying," he said, reaching for his weapon. "She's interfering with—" "Pull the airport security footage," Amanda said, voice steady and clear. 30 minutes before takeoff, cargo access. That badge number was used to bypass the system. Ricardo's eyes locked onto the officer like a predator scenting blood. "Check it," he ordered one of his men. The officer backed up a step. "This is a federal—" "You're no federal agent," Ricardo said quietly, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "You're whatever passes for a cleaner when frame jobs go wrong." The man's hand moved toward his gun, and Ricardo's security team moved faster. Within seconds, the fake officer was on his knees, arms wrenched behind his back, while his colleagues scattered toward waiting vehicles. Ricardo's men pursued immediately, gunfire cracking across the tarmac. But Ricardo didn't watch the chase. He watched Amanda. "How did you know?" he asked. "The badge number," she said, pulling up the tablet. It matched the cargo override exactly, down to the final digit. Real federal badges don't sync with private security systems, different databases. Ricardo stared at her for a long moment, something like admiration crossing his features. "Take him to the secondary location," he told his men. "Keep him breathing. I have questions." Behind them, the baby began to fuss, overtired, overstimulated by the commotion. The nanny tried to soothe him, but her hands were shaking too badly, her fear making the infant more agitated. Amanda moved instinctively, taking the baby with practiced gentleness. 3 taps, 2 presses, synchronized breathing. Within moments, the child settled against her shoulder, tiny fist curling into her uniform. Ricardo watched this unfold, his son calming in the arms of a woman who, 24 hours ago, had been a stranger. A woman who'd saved his child twice, who'd seen through a plot that should have destroyed him, who stood on a tarmac surrounded by violence and corruption, holding an infant like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You understand now," Ricardo said quietly. It wasn't a question. Amanda looked at the baby sleeping against her chest.
at the fake federal officer bleeding on the concrete, at Ricardo's world closing around her like a trap made of necessity and blood. "Yes," she whispered. She understood perfectly. She was hunted now, dangerous now, irreplaceable now. There was no going back to serving champagne and staying invisible. Amanda Mitchell had stepped into the darkness, and the darkness had claimed her as its own. The secondary location was a warehouse 20 minutes from the airfield. Concrete floors, soundproofed walls, and the kind of silence that made confessions inevitable. Amanda stood in the observation room, watching through one-way glass as Ricardo circled the bound officer like a shark assessing prey. She'd handed the baby back to the nanny at a secure safe house, ensuring he was fed, warm, and protected. Now she was here, in the heart of Ricardo's world. "His name is Vincent Krause," one of Ricardo's advisors murmured beside her. "Former military, dishonorable discharge, works freelance for anyone with enough money." Amanda barely heard him. She was listening to Krause, to the way his voice cracked when Ricardo asked certain questions, to the tells in his body language that revealed more than his words ever could. "Who hired you?" Ricardo asked, his tone conversational. "I don't know names." Wrong answer. Ricardo didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Krause flinched anyway. "I got the job through an intermediary. Dead drop payments, encrypted communications. I never met—" "The cargo override code," Amanda said suddenly, speaking into the intercom that connected to Ricardo's earpiece. "Ask him about the timing." Ricardo's eyes flickered toward the glass, then back to Krause. "The cargo override code?" he said smoothly. "Why 30 minutes before takeoff? Why not an hour? Why not during boarding?" Krause hesitated, and Amanda saw it. The micro-expression that meant he knew more than he was saying. Because someone needed to be present to authorize it. Someone with legitimate access who could mask the override with their own credentials. Ricardo's jaw tightened. He leaned closer to Krause. "Who was on the ground during that 30-minute window?" "I don't—" "Everyone lies better than you. Try again." Krause broke. "Your consigliere, Vittorio Marchesi, he was there. He approved the cargo transfer personally, said it was medical supplies for your son." The room went silent. Amanda's fingers flew across her tablet, pulling up financial records she'd been analyzing since they'd left the jet, wired transfers, offshore accounts, flight manifests. "There," she said, projecting the data onto the monitor. "Marchesi's accounts, 3 payments in the last 6 weeks, each one routed through shell corporations, total $2.3 million. Ricardo's advisors crowded around her, staring at the screen. "How did you—" one of them started. Cross-referenced his travel records with the payment dates. Every payment came within 48 hours of him visiting the same city, the same bank. And look, she pulled up another screen. Flight records. He's been coordinating with known arms dealers, not to buy, to sell. "To frame me?" Ricardo said, his voice coming through the speaker like ice cracking. "He knew you'd be vulnerable after losing your wife," Amanda continued, the pieces assembling in her mind with crystalline clarity. "He knew the baby would be inconsolable. He created the perfect storm. Chaos, distraction, emotional devastation. Then he planted weapons on your jet, tipped off federal authorities, and positioned himself to take over your operations when you went down for international trafficking." Ricardo's expression in the glass was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Where is he now?" he asked quietly. Amanda's fingers moved across the tablet. "He filed a flight plan 40 minutes ago. Private jet, destination Sao Paulo. Departure in," she checked the time, "18 minutes. The room exploded into motion. Ricardo emerged from the interrogation room, his presence filling the space like an oncoming storm. His eyes found Amanda immediately. "You're coming with me," he said quietly. Not a request, not an order, a statement of fact. "He knows I'm onto him," Ricardo continued, already moving toward the exit. "He'll have contingencies, fail-safes, people who will swear I'm lying. But he doesn't know about me," Amanda said, understanding flooding through her. "Exactly." Ricardo paused at the door, turning back to face her. "You're the only one who can see the patterns he's hidden, the connections he's buried. Without you, I get away," Amanda finished. "And my entire organization collapses. Every family under my protection, every business, every alliance, gone. Because one man exploited my grief." Amanda looked at the data on her tablet, at the web of deception that had nearly destroyed everything Ricardo had built, at the 18 minutes ticking down before Marchese disappeared forever. She closed the tablet. "Let's go." Ricardo's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if smiles could carry that much danger. "Welcome to the hunt, Amanda Mitchell." And together they ran toward the darkness, toward betrayal and blood, and the kind of justice that never saw the inside of a courtroom. Ricardo's jet screamed through the pre-dawn sky at maximum velocity, chasing the blip on radar that represented Marchese's escape. Amanda sat in the co-pilot's observation seat, tablet connected to the jet's advanced tracking systems, her mind working faster than the engines propelling them forward. "We're gaining," Ricardo said from beside her, his voice steady despite the stakes. 4 minutes to intercept range. Amanda's eyes scanned the thermal imaging feed from Marchese's jet and froze. "There," she said, pointing to anomalies clustered in the cargo hold. "Temperature signatures, same pattern as the weapons on your jet. He's carrying more." "Insurance," Ricardo growled. "If he can't frame me, he'll sell them himself." "No," Amanda said slowly, her analytical mind catching something darker. "Look at the placement. They're positioned around the fuel tanks. These aren't cargo." Her breath stopped. "They're fail-safes. If we board him, he'll detonate." Ricardo's jaw clenched. "Then we don't give him the chance." Within minutes, they'd closed the distance. Ricardo's elite team prepared for a mid-air boarding, a maneuver that defied every aviation regulation and several laws of physics. But Amanda wasn't watching them. She was watching the digital schematic of Marchese's jet, tracing the pattern of heat signatures, the positioning of what she now recognized as remote detonators. "There's a master trigger," she said suddenly. "It has to be. In the cockpit, disguised as standard equipment so it doesn't show on security scans." "Can you identify it?" Ricardo asked.
Amanda pulled up equipment manifests, cross-referencing serial numbers with standard aviation components. "There," she whispered. "Auxiliary power monitor. The serial number is 3 digits off from standard Gulfstream equipment. It's the trigger." The boarding team breached Marchese's jet at 31,000 feet. Explosive decompression controlled by emergency seals as Ricardo's men poured through like smoke. Gunfire cracked through the comm system, shouting in Italian. Then Marchese's voice, tight with fury. "One more step and I detonate everything. We all die." Amanda was already moving. She pushed past Ricardo's protests, entering Marchese's jet through the boarding tube, her hands steady despite her hammering heart. The cockpit door hung open. Marchese stood there, hand hovering over the disguised detonator, his eyes wild. "You," he snarled, recognizing her, "the air hostess who ruined everything." "Former air hostess," Amanda said quietly. Then she did something that made no tactical sense. She began the pattern. 3 taps on the bulkhead beside her. 2 soft presses on the doorframe. Slow inhale, slow exhale. the same rhythm she'd used to calm a screaming infant. Marchese stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but Amanda wasn't doing it for him. She was doing it for herself, grounding her own nervous system, steadying her racing heart, clearing her mind to see the pattern she needed. Her eyes tracked the wiring beneath the detonator panel. Red wire to capacitor, blue to ground, yellow to… there, a bypass circuit, hidden behind the main trigger. She had one chance. Amanda's hand shot forward, not toward the detonator, but toward the panel beside it. She ripped away the covering and yanked the yellow wire free. The detonator's light flickered, died. Marchese lunged for her, and Ricardo's security team took him down like a collapsing building. 30 minutes later, the jets landed in formation at a secure airfield. Marchese was dragged away in restraints, screaming threats that no one listened to. Amanda stood on the tarmac, hands finally shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Ricardo approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "You saved my son twice," he said quietly, his voice carrying only to her. "You saved me. You saved everything I've built." Amanda looked up at him, this dangerous, powerful man who'd lost his wife, nearly lost his child, nearly lost his empire. "I just did what needed to be done," she said simply. Ricardo studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, his voice dropping to something that felt like a vow. "From now on," he said, "you never fly alone." Amanda turned, looking out at the sky beyond the airfield, vast, endless, and full of shadows she was only beginning to understand. She'd stepped into a world of blood and betrayal, a world where babies cried and empires fell, a world she could never leave. But as Ricardo's hand settled gently on her shoulder, protective, possessive, grateful, Amanda realized something that should have terrified her. She didn't want to. The air hostess who only wanted to stay invisible had become the most visible thing in a mafia boss's world. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found exactly where she belonged. If you made it to the end, tell me, did you expect that twist? Comment your thoughts, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and thank you. Your support truly means the world.